G'day Bomber fans, we have got one more practice game left until we can start thinking about round one footy against the Hawks. Well, that's not true, we're already thinking about round one footy against the Hawks, but we do have one more practice game left, and that is this Saturday, Ballarat of all places, Essendon against St Kilda in the official pre-season game. This one is official, last week's was unofficial. Why that is, I don't know, but I'm not complaining because this week we've got proper broadcasting, we've got better cameras, better commentary, we've got champion data stats. By the way, quick shout out to the Keeper League for providing all us footy nerds with the stats from the unofficial games, but this weekend it is official. These pre-season games are not meaningful. I won't say meaningless because I'll talk about why they are, but I think in terms of results and scores, you can just write it off. We beat Geelong this time last year. I've said that about a billion times this preseason. You just shouldn't read into the results and just the surface level facts from these games. But if you're a team in Essendon's position lower down the ladder, these games can be really beneficial. I think for Brisbane and Geelong, they'd probably rather kick the feet up and relax and just get into the season where they're going to be premiership favourites. But for teams that are in their glow up phase, they're rebuilding, they're growing and building through the draft, these games can be beneficial. You not only get the chance to manufacture momentum a bit and morale heading into the season with, wins and goals and good moments, which don't count for much in terms of the actual season, but give you that morale. I think also importantly, you get the chance to both develop your team's synergy and connection while also tracking difficult, discussions or selection dilemmas. Like these games are good tests for teams still finding their feet in the competition, and that's why they're not meaningless for teams like Essendon, and that's why teams like Essendon lower down the ladder are probably having so much fun dissecting these games, whereas your Brisbane fans are just waiting for the season to start. So for Essendon, I think after last year where you had a team just absolutely belted by injuries, you had half a season of playing mismatched footy with no synergy, this is a great opportunity for us to just get games under the belt with senior players like Darcy Parish alongside those younger players as well. The results don't matter, but the discussions that come from these games do matter for teams like Essendon. So yes, we shouldn't read too much into these games, but we should definitely be reading into them a little bit. I guess the main discussion or fuel for discussion and talking point from these practice games really does center around the selection committee and the individuals pushing for round one selection. So really, to sum it up, if you're not in these practice games and you're available to play in them, it's probably showing that you're off to the side and lower down the pecking order and maybe not really a solidified option to play round one footy. And the thought behind that is, you've got a squad of 26 for these games with 8 on the bench. In the AFL, you've got 23 with 5 on the bench. So if you're not in the 26, you can still be in the 26 and miss out in the AFL, by the way. But if you're not in it to start with for these practice games, especially for a team like Essendon who really do need to build synergy and connection given how much we missed of it last year, it's definitely showing you're off to the side. So we're first going to look at the guys that are unavailable or unlikely to play in this game through injury. These guys still, some of them may well play round one footy, but they're not going to be available to play against St Kilda this weekend. You start with Jordan Ridley, who was pushing for round one. He was going to be available and have minutes for this St Kilda game, but unfortunately has suffered another soft tissue injury, this time to his calf. So he's going to miss over a month of footy, which is horrible because he just can't take a break, that guy. Lewis Hayes and Killian Burke won't be playing early. Nick Martin won't be playing at all this season. He's out for the whole year. You've got Setterfield and Bryan, probably not really in the round one mix, but early into the season. Isaac Hacko is definitely in the round one mix. He is pushing to be available for round one. No real time frame yet, given the fact that it was a minor hamstring injury, and if it's not round one, it'd probably be round 2 or 3. Tom Edwards, he's another who'll be back earlier rounds, probably earlier than Bryan, it seems. Sullivan Roby is ramping up his training from that back hotspot, which is really good to see. Reece Unwin, unfortunately, had a calf setback, so he's going to miss the early rounds. The main one really that I'm noting is Harry Jones, who is going to play this weekend, but it will be in the VFL for practice minutes. So this is someone who's getting to the stage where he is fit enough to play AFL footy, but given the fact he's been out for so long with that ankle injury and had a few setbacks in between in that time as well, with that ankle, getting it cleaned out and everything, he's going to need match conditioning, and the best way to do that is through the VFL. So there are, how many players are there? There are 11 players of 45 that I am saying are unavailable or unlikely to play in this practice game, which means we have 34 players potentially available to play that we need to squeeze into 26. So on screen right now, apologies Spotify listeners, but on screen right now I have got the 34 players that I believe are available for selection. So yeah, the interesting thing here is the fact that we have to condense it to 26. You can't have more than 26 in these practice game squads, and it's even harder than it was last week because you've got guys like Mason Redman and Zach Merritt returning to the team. They're going to be playing against St. Kilda on Saturday. So the big question is, how do these guys fit into the team? I think there are a few where it's a bit 50-50. Like, Archie Perkins, for example, is clear to play minutes. Whether that's going to be AFL or VFL, time will tell. Same with Nick Cox, and also, I guess, same with Sam Durham a little bit, because he was wearing the no contact cap in training, meaning, he's avoiding tackling after rolling that ankle a little bit potentially. So whether or not the club is, obviously they're being precautionary with that contact cap, but whether or not they extend that precaution into this weekend, time will tell. But even with those guys available or unavailable, you've still got players missing out. So for starters, you look at the guys who missed out and played in last week's VFL game who were available for selection last week. You've got Cale Gerine, Liam McMahon. No real surprises there. I kind of assumed that they wouldn't be in the round one discussion anyway. Archer Day Wicks as well played VFL. So did Elijah Sardis. That's another interesting one there. So already, even those four cut down, you still need to, eat out a few more names there that won't be available. Is that where you start leading into guys like, Vigo Vicentini? Is he going to be in the ruck discussion alongside Lockie Blackiston for this game, or will it be more Peter Wright? And if that's the case, is Archer May given another week, to be that kind of, I guess, dual ruck hit-out option in case Peter Wright needs to play forward? There are a few things that are really interesting and kind of tough to get a read on. Jade Gresham and Matt Guelphy both played kind of limited minutes and didn't really show their best in last week's game, where Elachkar was so good in front of the sticks. But of course, we don't really have the small forwards available without Isaac Kako, so that's another one to really keep an eye on. The general defensive zone is fascinating to me. You've got Kondagiannis, who is genuinely looking like a round one option at this stage, and then you've got Farrow, Newen, El Hawley, Johnson, all battling for spots where there really aren't many, especially with Mason Redman there. So if anyone misses out, if anyone is available and misses out on this game, it is a big indication that they're not ready to play round one footy. Like any young player, any senior player, if it's a Jade Gresham and he misses out, he's probably not in the round one team. If it's a younger player and they miss out, it probably shows that they're more likely to play VFL footy to start the year. Of course, if there's a niggle or something else, that could explain you not, being risked for a game like this, because you don't want to send someone in for this game if they're not right to play in it. But if you are 100% available and playing full minutes in the VFL, it is a great indication that you're not going to be playing in this AFL game. As someone said last week, last week's game is a good indication as to who is ready for this week's game. This week's game is a good indication as to who's ready for round one. And for a team like Essendon, who need to build chemistry and cohesion, we're going to be looking at pretty much our best lineup available. Like, we're not going to just be resting players for the sake of it. So I'm looking at guys like, Vigo Vicentini, Elijah Sardis, Archer May, Guelphy, and Gresham are probably the ones, like, of those three. How does our forward line function with them in it? If Perkins is available, one of them has to miss out, you'd assume. The defenders, there are so many names there. There are so many names, but they all seem like they are well and truly in the conversation, all the way from Andy McGrath to Kondagiannis. Like, that whole list there, aside from Cale Gerine, they could all play round one, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like, not together, but any of those names could play round one, and I wouldn't be surprised. So I guess this is the fascinating thing, because we've got, I reckon, about 30 or 31 available players right now who would be thinking that they are right to play round one footy, and then you throw in guys like Isaac Kako, who could be available round one as well. It really is, it's probably, in a weird way, the deepest squad we've had in a long time. It really does feel that way, and a lot of that is because a lot of these players are developing. Like, I'm not saying that, our worst player is as good as some of the worst players in other teams in the competition. I still think we're probably quite down the lower end in the depth of talent at the moment, or ready-made talent. But the fact that we've got so many players pushing for selection in round one and for this particular practice game is really, really pleasing. And what's even more pleasing is the fact that plenty are going to miss out and play in the VFL. Like, do you remember last year when we had, I think some weeks, like 2 or 3 players playing in the VFL sometimes? Like, we really didn't have a team to select. And those players playing in the VFL were often just playing there and ready to be delisted at the end of the year anyway. That was the really unfortunate situation that we found ourselves in last year. But early days in 2026, the good news is we have got players really pushing for selection, and the ones that are missing are going to be playing in the practice game on Sunday. Let's go through some of the things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on in this game. I think it's better to kind of, give you guys and myself some indications and some little notes as to what to look out for, rather than just preview the game as if it's, a meaningful result. But what I'm going to be keeping an eye on to start with is the quality difference between the two teams. Now, last week we obviously smashed Richmond off the park. They barely had a team. Like we were young out there, but that's nothing compared to what they had. They took pretty much most of their experience, all their experience off the field after halftime, and just let us, have a little training drill by ourselves pretty much. That was as meaningful at times in that game as an intra-club would have been, because of some of the names that were involved in that game. But this one here, we are going to have a St Kilda pretty much A team with a few injured players, but you got guys like Nasiah Wangadeen-Millera, Tom De Koning, Rowan Marshall, Cal Wilkie. You've got Brad Hill and Sinclair returning from State of Origin as well. Those are really good players, all Australian players, quite a few of them. You've also got the core, like the Tarus, the Travaglias, Philippou, Marcus Winhager, whether he's going to, tag a player or not, and that creates an even better discussion, because then you have the matchups and what they entail. Will St Kilda kind of test the tag a little bit on a Darcy Parish or a Zach Merritt, and what would that look like? How is, Jaden Ewan going to go on Jack Higgins in their kind of second little meeting if they play on each other? You've got my favourite part is the wingman being exposed. I think that is my favourite little part of this quality difference discussion, because last week, Pryor and Fiorini looked really solid in their respective positions. Fiorini probably provided a fair bit more with the ball. Jackson Pryor's the one to watch for me, because for me, he is a placeholder until we have a better option on the wing. I like his defensive stability, but how is he going to go on instead of one of those young Richmond players, a Kane McAuliffe or someone, how will he go on a Mason Wood or a Brad Hill or a Darcy Wilson, someone with a bit more athleticism and damage? So that's what I'm going to be watching out for. I'm going to be watching Jackson Pryor very closely and seeing how he goes with his little quality difference in his matchup. But overall, just the fact that we're going from playing, a bottom 4 Richmond team, but also their B team, going up against St Kilda, who are going to be challenging for finals, playing most of their, senior experienced players out there, seeing how the kids go against them. The first thing to keep an eye on is the quality difference and just, I guess, the gap between the two teams and how large it is. Okay, of course, we're going to talk about ball movement again, because this has been a major feature for the Bombers this pre-season. This is important in this game as well, and I really like that we've got St Kilda to play, because, obviously I just spoke about the quality difference with Richmond and St Kilda and what it means. It also means teams can play to a system better if they've got their best players available, and typically, at least in the past, St Kilda under Ross Lyon have been a team who prioritise stemming free-flowing footy rather than embracing it, and that's their opposition free-flowing footy. And to be honest, from what I saw in the last game against the Suns, they did look a lot more exciting and direct, but I think either way, this is a great test to see how effective we are with the footy against a good opposition defence, because St Kilda have always been a really reliable defensive unit. And I guess, a team that knows how to defend the footy and defend the ground in St Kilda, what I'm going to be looking out for is how fluent and connected we look, and how St Kilda try and disrupt that. It's all well and good to look like prime Barcelona against Richmond last week, a team without, all of its players pretty much. But this is where we get a good indication as to how we're starting to look round one with our ball movement, with how we're moving the footy. Essendon against Ross Lyon, I think this is almost the perfect practice game for the Bombers heading into what we've got, some tough games to start the year. Okay, the ruck battle. I think of all the individual matchups on the field on Saturday, the most fascinating one for me is going to be Tom De Koning up against Lockie Blackiston, or Lockie Blackiston up against De Koning and Rowan Marshall. But really, the main one is De Koning. He is St Kilda's main ruckman. Marshall will be playing a lot more up the ground, but obviously Blackiston last weekend against Richmond was fantastic. He was one of our better players, and what that showed me is that Blackiston against ruckmen who don't benefit from the ruck rules, and maybe slower ruckmen, and maybe, the lesser rucks in the comp, no offense, Toby and Curvis, but it shows that Blackiston can get off the leash and have a real impact in those games. That is a good tick. That is a very good bonus to have from a ruckman, especially one we took from the mid-season draft. The question now is, how does Blackiston go against the ruckmen who are, I guess, perceived to be better than him in the competition? So Tom de Koning is, I would say, one of the better ruckmen in the competition, especially with these new rules where it really does kind of, you can embrace the athleticism and leap at the footy a lot more, like Blackiston does. But Tom de Koning is the one, he's the blueprint. That's the player that, St. Kilda spent so much money on, knowing these ruck rules were going to change, knowing they'd be in place. The question is, how does Blackiston break even? If Blackiston can break even in this game against de Koning, that would give me so much faith heading into round 1, where he's got, Ned Reeves and Lloyd Meek, round 3 against Tristan Jerry. These senior ruckmen in the competition, we don't know how good Blackiston is going to be this year. That is, we just do not. We've seen him play so many games as a key defender where he battled hard, and the only ruck we've seen from him is last week against Toby Nankervis, who I think is past it. And again, no offense, Toby Nankervis, if you're watching, don't know why you would be. This is going to be a great little test for Lockie Blackiston heading into the season, and hopefully a great little burst of confidence knowing that he can match it with the best ruckman in the competition. Now, obviously, he has to do that first for that to occur, but it would also be a bit of a worry on the flip side if de Koning was to get the upper hand, and then we've got our main ruck probably not on the level as the other main rucks, and then our backup ruck being a key forward in Peter Wright. So that'll create a really good discussion whether or not we go in with Peter Wright or Vicentino, who is also not ready. Yeah, I think our ruck stocks are an area of concern for me heading into 2026 until Nick Bryan returns. And even when he does return, it's probably safe to say we don't have an A grade or even a B grade ruckman in our team, or a B plus grade ruckman. This game's going to be a good indication to see just how good Lockie Blackiston is. Of course, we have to look out for the debutants, or the potential debutants. We had 15 last year, and we may have a few more round 1 against Hawthorn, up to 4. And I think, honestly, genuinely, there is 100% a world where all 4 of them play against Hawthorn. I don't think that's the case, but all of them are really in the conversation for round 1. I'd say all 4 of our debutants lining up to play in this St. Kilda game are in the top 26, 27, 28 players in our team right now in the pecking order. So you've got Dyson Sharp, he just looks so ready at the contest. He looks like that big-bodied midfielder that you need in a team, as depth at least. I don't know if he's going to play on a half-forward flank against Hawthorn. Just given the fact that he's in space, not as good on the footy, you'd rather him extracting for someone else to be on the outside, delivering inside 50. Of the 4, I'm starting to think that Dyson Sharp is the one maybe more likely to be rested on the outside a little bit, as in the VFL to start the year, because I think we've got options in the midfield. We clearly didn't use Dyson Sharp against those primes Richmond midfielders last week. He got the second least amount of centre bounce attendances of all the midfielders that went through there, the least amount being Braden Fiorini, who's a wingman. I think Dyson Sharp is probably the one on the outside a little bit of the pecking order, but a big performance here could definitely change that. You've got Hussein Elachkar, who I think is going to play round 1 against the Hawks. He was really good against Richmond, and another performance here against the Saints would really just lock him in for that round 1 start. Jacob Farrow looked so classy on the footy. He looked so ready with ball in hand. The big question is what he looks like without ball in hand. It's kind of the opposite with Dyson Sharp a little bit, but I think there's more of a need for a Jacob Farrow in the team round 1, just because we don't have as many good ball users coming out of the back half. But he's clearly in a battle for spots with guys like Zach Johnson, and we'll see what happens there. The main one to watch, though, is Max Kondagiannis. This guy was training with the A team in the back 6 recently, meaning, he's in the back 6 right now. And of course, it's hard to compare, Johnson, Farrow, and Kondagiannis and kind of put them all in the conversation together, because, they're very different players. But that's the reason why I think Kondagiannis could be a step ahead of a Jacob Farrow right now, because Jordan Ridley's missing. He's not going to play round 1, and we need to replace him somehow. And Max Kondagiannis, although very young, is looking like a viable option as that replacement at the moment. So he may well be in the round 1 discussion as well right now. Like that is awesome. You've got 4 18-year-olds lining out there for a practice game, all thinking that they're a genuine chance to play round one, all a genuine chance to play round one. It's been a while since we had that. Obviously last year 15 debutants, but I only really remember Isaac Kako and maybe Angus Clark playing in these games to start the year. This time round we've got 4 prize draftees, another prize draftee, the one that we took with our first selection, off to the side, ramping up his training. Fantastic issue to have. These selection headaches are really good ones when they're all young players. But guys, as I said, the results from these games don't mean a lot. There's not too much to talk about them heading into the game. I'm going to have a couple of videos out after the match, though. I'll have my review the day after, seeing how the game went, how it unfolded from a strategic and tactical viewpoint, and then a couple of days after that, I will have the player ratings or review video as well, where I dissect the entire squad that played, go through them, go through their performances, and really just talk about how they did, like I did with Scott the other day on Monday. And if there's any guests that you want to come on the channel, let me know now in the comments below, and I'll try and get in touch with them so we can make that happen either this week or later in the year. But guys, that is all. Honestly, fairly big practice game coming up. This is probably the biggest, or I guess the most significant preseason game I've seen the club kind of lead into in a long time, and that's because 2026 is a very interesting year. I don't know how to describe it. I'll have more words, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. We'll have my season preview and predictions out as well. But guys, for now, that is all. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Give your predictions in the comments below. How do you think the Bombers will do? And as always, go Bombers.